Now I want to focus on what retaliation looks like and why it's discouraged. First, retaliation is taking matters into your own hand. It is going on this personal mission to make sure that the perpetrator is harmed by you. Taking action is calling for the community to enact justice on your behalf, whether this is through mediating a civil suit between you and the perpetrator or through the community directly suing the perpetrator like in a criminal suit. When you use the community or justice institutions, you are not at risk of enacting more injustices, and you're also protected from the perpetrator. Now, if the community or the justice system is unjust, we get into theories of large-scale and small-scale social change, which presents this whole other set of ethical issues. For the sake of this project, and the 2 weeks I have left of this project, my focus is on what can happen in the existing institutions rather than how can we create systemic change. Retaliation in the sexual assault context is getting a gun sometime after the assault happened and going after the perpetrator so you can harm the perpetrator. And that's still illegal. Now, if you have a gun and you use it in self-defense during the assault, that's a matter for courts and the laws and not this video. Retaliation is taking matters into your own hands and enacting harm rather than allowing the community to pursue justice on your behalf. Retaliation in the domestic violence context would be yelling or hitting your abuser back. Last week, the president of the organization I work with was presenting to a group of women, some of whom are domestic violence victim advocates. One of these women and I were speaking after the presentation about retaliation. She will frequently will give presentations to young people about unhealthy or abusive relationships. What you'll commonly hear from young girls is, if he hits me, then I'm going to hit him back. Well, what if he hits you again and again? What if he hits you so hard you can't get back up? Retaliation can quickly devolve into the circle of violence. Sure, it may deter the abuser at first, but it's very high risk and it's very dangerous. With online harassment, retaliation typically takes the form of naming and shaming. You publicly identify the person harassing you, whether with an identifying photo or their real name, and you publicly share the harassment to shame the person. You harmed me, so I will harm you. It would be the victim of non-consensual porn, publicly sharing intimate photos of the perpetrator. Or with cyberbullying, it would be the victim of cyberbullying contacting the perpetrator's mother and sharing, this "and" is very important, and publicly sharing that communication with mom on social media. Naming and shaming is very high risk. There's a low probability that the harassment will completely stop and a very high probability it will worsen. Online retaliation is just as dangerous and violence perpetuating as offline retaliation. But Alex, what if the naming and shaming stops the harassment? Well, yes, it's good that the harassment stopped, but I have two follow-up questions. First, are you contributing to the problem rather than the solution? And second, are you really sure that the harassment has stopped? One example of naming and shaming that I read about earlier this year in John Ronson's So You've Been Publicly Shamed that I hope will illuminate why I'm asking these questions. There was a female tech developer at a conference who heard a man making sexual remarks behind her. She tweeted about the remarks, turned around, took his picture, and then tweeted his image. The conference organizers quickly met with both of these people to resolve the issue, and the man quickly apologized. However, the tweet was still out there. So he was shamed online and subsequently lost his job. She was then targeted by a men's rights cyber mob and was also fired. The man was not right to make sexual remarks, especially at a tech conference, given the amount of discrimination and sexism women in STEM face. The woman was right to tweet about these remarks. This was a call for recognizing the problem, for saying, here is a big problem we face as women in STEM. We need to recognize it and fix it. However, in identifying this man with a picture of him, took the exchange from this call for recognition to naming and shaming. It went from here's a big problem, recognize it, to here's a big problem that we should blame him for. Publicly identifying him subjected him to his own harassment, so we contributed to another problem rather than contributing to a solution. Neither individual were right here. Furthermore, she was subjected to more harassment because people online hit back and continued the circle of violence. Retaliation, naming and shaming your perpetrator, is fighting fire with fire. It's stooping to the perpetrator's level as two wrongs don't make a right. If the principled and ethical arguments don't work for you, naming and shaming retaliation is dangerous. The abuser can hit back harder. There's a reason the advocates of sexual assault and domestic violence victims discourage it. It should be discouraged in online harassment too.